What's up, everybody, and welcome into the H&M Trucking Podcast, episode 45 for your ear holes. I am your host, Marcus. Thank you so much for being here today. I have virtually zero time to get to any of our homework, so I'm just going to say hit the subscribe button. You know it's magic. And let's go ahead and get right into thanking, or not thanking, I guess we'll thank them later, but we'll welcome them now. We got new drivers. Welcome to H&M, Rodney Gaddis. He's a van OTR driver. Welcome, DeRaven Gibbs. He's a van OTR driver as well. And a big welcome back to H&M to Tom Williams. He's a return hopper driver, OTR. Happy to have you all on board with such a great company. H&M Trucking welcomes you to the team by way of this podcast. Well, this podcast has got to get moving because we have so much to get to. I have a new guest coming on the podcast today who's going to be joining me a bunch more in the future. He is a retired H&M driver, and that's the only secret I'm going to give up right now. But somebody with a lot more experience holding on to the wheel than what I have, and I think that's going to be a really cool addition to the show. So we'll get him in here in just a few to chat about some of the things we're talking about today. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is autonomous trucks. We also have some breaking news that we'll get to with that new special guest, and I've got a couple drivers on that are going to talk about their thoughts on autonomous trucks. And when I say autonomous trucks, I think I want to let this term just kind of be the umbrella above the conversation. When I say autonomous, I'm thinking of driver assisted. I'm thinking of remotely operated. I'm thinking no driver at all. Anything that really shakes up the traditional balance of having a driver in the seat to drive the truck and take care of all the other things that come along with that. So really awesome conversation coming up around the bend. But for now, let's just go ahead and get to our brand new special guest joining me on the H&M Trucking Podcast.
From Omaha, Nebraska, to whatever lane you're driving, this is the H&M Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
Next up here on the H&M Trucking Podcast, I'm so excited to have my next guest in here with me, and actually kind of convinced that before too long, we won't even be calling him a guest. We'll be calling him a member of the H&M Trucking Podcast. He is retired H&M driver Denny Stone. Denny, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, yeah. Fun. People say, will you miss it? And some aspects I do, but I'm loving retirement, man. I can't lie to you.
Well, that's great to hear. I know that you've got some hobbies that you're working on to keep yourself busy during the retirement. What type of stuff are you getting into to fill the time?
Well, like my father, I've been a woodworker off and on all my life, and I enjoy doing that more and more, doing handwork rather than, I use machines to shape things and get them down, but then I finish them by hand. I do live edge cutting boards and charcuterie boards and just a little bit of everything, but built me a nice workshop out in the back when we moved back to Texas. And I'm just now finally kind of getting organized there, and then had the pieces, the guts to a home studio from my old days at radio, and put that back together. And that's where I am now, in the guest bedroom. So here we are.
That's awesome. I'm very excited to hear about your career path and how you went from broadcaster to driver. So why don't you talk me through that? Talk to me about how you got your start in broadcasting. As a former radio professional myself, I know that it's not the easiest thing to break into. For me, I like to tell people, they say, how did you get your job in radio? I said, I had some friends that had a job there, and I sort of showed up and never left until they paid me. A lot of people I know get their start like that. How did you get your start in broadcasting, Denny?
Very similar. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to college at Stephen F. Austin in East Texas in Nacogdoches, and studying radio and TV. And I had a friend that did the late night album rock show at the radio station up on the hill, and I'd go hang out with him, and he was lazy, so he'd have me queuing up the records and getting things ready while he sat back. And before you know it, I was learning more up there than I was in class. Worked for a while at radio, and then I, as my ex-wife used to say, I grew up and got a real job. I I became a professional firefighter and EMT and did that for a number of years. Then took my retirement money and went to Texas A&M to study mechanical engineering. Wound up working at a hotel because I could work the overnight shift and have time to study at the same time. So apparently I was doing okay because they made me a night auditor, then the manager. I was managing the hotel before it was over with. So I switched my career path to business and hated going to work every single day. Absolutely hated it. I dreaded getting up in the morning. So a buddy of mine called me. He knew I'd been in radio and he needed somebody. And I took a cut in pay and went back to radio in the mid 80s and spent better than 25 years in country radio for the most part. Everything, doing on air, of course, production director, promotions director, program director, music director for the majority of my career. Well, the transition to trucking happened when our youngest son was a sophomore in high school, and he was doing exceptionally well. He was in the honor society, National Honor Society. He was in a dual enrollment program. He went mornings to college, afternoons to high school, and this was paid for by the state of Florida. We lived in Florida at the time.
Wow.
And then he went straight from school to Taekwondo. He started teaching Taekwondo when he was 12 or 13 years old.
Wow.
So I didn't want to uproot him. The company I worked for, one of the largest broadcasting companies in the world, drew a line in the sand. It didn't matter what your ratings were, how dependable you were, how long you've been with them. If you made more than X amount of money, you were gone. And they let over 400 people go in one day.
Wow, Denny, that is crazy. 400 people from one company.
Yep. And there's a thing called a no-compete contract in radio that's very common. So for me to stay in radio, I'd have had to move and uproot Corey, my youngest. And I just really didn't want to do that. And I was frankly a little disillusioned with radio and where it had gone in the last few years anyway. And so I went and got my CDL and started driving a truck. And first couple of years were kind of tough, but then a buddy of mine that worked for H&M that I'd never known him to stay at a company more than 3 months without trying to break down the dispatcher's door and hurt somebody. And he was happy there after a year. I'm like, okay, well, if you can be happy at H&M, I can be happy at H&M. So I made the move over there and never looked back. I left there just happy as I could be. I hated to leave, but I wanted to retire and spend more time with my grandkids and my wife. And she went back to school after I started driving a truck. She actually completed her associates and then her bachelor's while I was on the road. Gave her something to do while I was gone for so long.
For sure.
Anyway, there's the short version of my life story.
That's awesome. Well, I don't know if your wife can relate to this, but when I'm not in the house, she gets a lot more done because she doesn't have a former broadcaster just talking her ear off all the time. Those of us that got into radio for the love of the game, we're talkers. There's no question about it. And that's so cool that your wife was able to roll that time into getting an education that she wanted to get. And I'm just so happy that you found a company like H&M to work for. Tell me, what about H&M made you stay there for as long as you did? And I guess we should probably enter this into the conversation as well. How long were you there for? Like, how many years, and also how many miles? Because I know you were honored at one point.
I did well over 10 years and over 1 million miles with H&M. That doesn't count the miles I had before that. So probably at least 1.5 million total. I didn't like short haul. I tried it. I did dedicated lanes for a while before I was at H&M, and I didn't like driving the same roads all the time. I really dislike city traffic. So even though I lived in Florida and then Tennessee, most of my time was spent in the Midwest and Northwest.
Okay.
I would, within a day or so of leaving home in Tennessee, I would be in Omaha or Des Moines, and from there off to Montana or the Dakotas. I spent a lot of time up in that part of the world. So I put some miles behind me.
Okay. Well, did you ever get over here to my home state of Oregon to drive up and down I-5 corridor, or maybe the Columbia Gorge on Interstate 84?
Oh, many, many times. I-5 is not my favorite road.
You and just about everybody that has to drive it, Denny.
Yeah, it's not as bad in Oregon as it is south of there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's terrible down south, and there's some stretches down there through California that are so boring too. I mean, there's a lot of scenic area that you drive through, but a lot of times you got to spend some time on a long, boring straight stretch to get to that scenic area.
Before I went to H&M, I was running a coast-to-coast run. I'd come out of Florida with produce, tomatoes or potatoes or something, and go up to Atlanta. And from there, I picked up cookie dough, believe it or not, and took cookie dough all the way to Ontario, California.
Wow.
Every time I did it, I thought, wouldn't it be cheaper to just make cookie dough in California? But I'd do that. And then I'd go up to Salinas to pick up produce, do a reset in Salinas. And luckily, my brother and his family lived there. So I got to see them every couple of weeks and then turn around and haul it all the way back to Arcadia, Florida. Then I'd do a reset at home. I did that for probably a year and a half.
Wow.
And I'd leave Ontario. And since I hate traffic so much, I would go straight up to, I'd go through Palmdale, actually. I'd go up 15 and then cut off and cut through Palmdale and up that way. And then up a little ways over through, go over to 99 and take 99 up. So
okay,
I don't like interstates. I try to avoid them. There's a lot of alternate routes in this country. I know. I'm sure Dale Cook many times pulled up that computer and goes, well, there he goes again. He's supposed to be over here, but he's over there.
It obviously didn't get under his skin enough to let you go, because 10 long years and over 1 million miles later, you were still doing it that way, right?
Most of the time I actually saved miles, believe it or not.
Really? That's awesome. That's very cool. Well, Denny, I'm just super happy to have you here for all your experience, both on the broadcasting side and on the CDL side. And it's exciting to me for more than one reason. I clearly, without any experience behind the wheel of a truck, there's a lot that I don't know. And two, besides that, it's just nice to have somebody to bounce stuff off of. You know, I talk about my wife having to listen to me talk all the time. I have to listen to me a lot too. And frankly, I'd like a little break.
Gilly, come here. Gilly, come. See if I can get my buddy over here. Gilly.
Now, yeah, you're calling over your dog right now, and this dog is a bit of a famous piece in the H&M lore, and there she is on camera right now. Tell us about your little furry one.
Gilly has been with me for almost all of those 1 million miles. He's been all over the country. The joke with my wife was, well, Gilly's peed here before. Yeah. But everybody knows Gilly. People that don't even recognize me will recognize him. If I showed up at the office and went in just to do something real quick, first thing they'd say is, where's Gilly? I say, well, he's out in the truck. Bert, go get him. They wouldn't deal with me unless I went and got Gilly.
Oh, okay. You had to come. You had to come with their buddy before they wanted to talk to you, huh?
Pretty much, yeah. But everybody knows Gilly. He spent a lot of time with me. He's about 9.5 years old now.
Oh, wow.
I actually saw a post, I think, on Facebook. There was just a farming family south of Davenport that was getting rid of some beagle puppies, and I happened to know somebody in Davenport. He met me at Iowa 80, the world's largest truck stop, and I paid him for gas, and he took me down there to get this puppy. All of the rest of our dogs are rescues. My wife is a surgical tech, a vet tech at an animal hospital, and she keeps bringing them home. We have 4 now, and I keep telling her, you know, we can't ever leave. It's like living on a ranch or a farm. You know, we got too many animals. But yeah, she's rescued a number of them. I think we've rescued at least a half a dozen over the last few years.
That's awesome. That's very touching to hear. You know, I'm a giant dog person, and one of the questions that I've always asked every driver is, who's in the cab with you? Sometimes it's a person, but most of the time it's an animal of some sort, whether it be cats or dogs. And Gilly is definitely famous. I've seen the YouTube videos. There's a video of you on H&M's YouTube with Gilly, and he is just such a great looking dog. I know beagles to be incredibly smart. I have some close family friends who have to lock their kitchen cupboard doors and their kitchen drawers because the beagle will pull them out in like a step form, and he will walk up through the drawers to where he can get on the counter, Does Gilly ever get into any kind of shenanigans like that? Is he smart enough to get himself in trouble?
He's smart enough, but he's the one that's actually trained.
Oh, okay.
Believe it or not, he's a service dog.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
That kind of stemmed from a breakdown. I had to put the truck in a shop in Cheyenne, Wyoming one year, and they had it in pieces all over the dealership. And here it is coming up on 5 o'clock, and I couldn't find a hotel that would take a dog. I finally got lucky at the last possible moment. I didn't know what I was going to do or where I was going to go because I couldn't sleep in the truck. It was in the bay and they were going to close. Well, I broke my back in the mid 80s. And so I used that excuse and went through the process of getting him trained and getting his ID card and everything. So he's trained to get things for me.
That's awesome.
He mostly ignores me now since we don't do it anymore. But yeah, I drop something on the floor, he'll get it for me. And that way, if I did find myself in a bind, he can go to a hotel with me. I don't have to argue with people about it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm glad to hear that because that's your buddy. You know, he needs to be alongside you. If he's keeping you company on the road, why the hell can't he stay in a hotel? That's always bugged me. I mean, you know, I know there's other people there and everything like that, but it's a lap dog, you know, for the most part. I mean, you know, especially a trained one. So I'm glad that there's hotels out there that accommodate for people with their animals. I wish there was more. I will say that, but glad that you got him his credentials so that he can go wherever he needs to be with you. That's a cool story. Yeah. And they make companions unlike any person ever could. And it's not to say that there aren't people capable of loving you unconditionally out there. It's just that there's no criteria for a dog. Just be that dog's buddy. They're going to love you forever, yep. Man. It's awesome. And
to plug the rescues, I got to tell you, somehow they know you saved them. They're the most loving dogs. We've got 3 right now. Got a Great Pyrenees that my wife rescued years ago. He was no bigger than, you know, not probably 2-3 hands full is all he was when she brought him home. And his back legs didn't work. These people had him in a cage so small he couldn't even move. Oh, no. He was covered in ants and feces, and she cleaned him up, named him Forrest Gump because his back legs didn't work. Within a week or 2, his legs were fine once he could move around. But yeah, I'd hate to see what would happen if somebody ever raised a hand to her. But other than that, he's the sweetest dog ever. He's just loving and good-natured, but he loves my wife. And then there's another beagle that she rescued in Tennessee that was a stray, and she's the one that would figure a way to get into the cabinet and get into stuff. You know better than to leave a sandwich sitting on the counter and go to the bathroom because it's going to be gone when you come back. It has happened.
I'm sure it has. And I'm also sure that Great Pyrenees is probably a little bigger than a couple handfuls at this point in time, yeah?
Probably about 100 pounds. He's small as Pyrenees go, but yeah,
but big as any other dog goes. Well, that's awesome, Denny. I look forward to getting to know more about the animals as time goes on, for sure. And thank you for sharing that with us, because I know that's a real important part in people's lives, and sometimes they're not always excited to talk about the love that they have for their animals. And I can tell already you're going to fit great here with me, Denny, because you're a dog guy. That's all we look for on this podcast. So I do want to ask you some things. I mean, I could sit here and just shoot the crap with you all day long, and we would get nothing done but have a fantastic conversation. I'm going to actually go into work mode here, which sometimes people on the podcast are either familiar with or unfamiliar with, depending on which episodes they've listened to. But we got some big breaking news in the industry, and as a former driver, I kind of want to get your take on it. I'm going to read you some snippets from an article here from FreightWaves.com, author John Gallagher. The FMCSA head has stepped down, according to FreightWaves.com. Robin Hutchinson is resigning from her post as head of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. A U.S. Department of Transportation source confirmed to FreightWaves on Tuesday. Her last day will be January 26th, which I believe is Friday. Sue Lawless is FMCSA's assistant director, and she will head up the agency as an acting administrator after Hutchinson's departure. In a statement released by the FMCSA on Friday, Hutchison said it has been a, quote, profound honor to serve under the Biden-Harris administration. Quote, I thank Secretary Buttigieg for his leadership and confidence and recognize the dedicated team of professionals at the DOT who work hand in hand with industry partners to serve American people to keep our country moving. She was confirmed back on September 2022 and has been FMCSA's 7th administrator since the agency was established. Now, she was also, Denny, criticized by lawmakers during a hearing on Capitol Hill last month because she was taking part in a fundraiser while a proposed regulation that would limit truck speeds was and still is pending. The fundraiser allegedly was sponsored by labor unions and trial attorneys that are supporters of this controversial rule. At a Capitol Hill hearing on Wednesday, the FMCSA came under fire again from the Transportation Intermediaries Association for paying too much attention to non-safety issues such as private contracts between brokers and trucking companies. You know, just a little bit more context here. Since Raymond Martinez stepped down under the Trump administration in 2019, all 4 leaders of the FMCSA, including Hutchinson for a time, were merely acting leaders. They were not confirmed by the Congress. She's the first head of the FMCSA to be confirmed by Congress in 4 years. Denny, what effect do you think the lack of solidified and confirmed leadership over the last 5 years has had on the FMCSA and by extension the transportation industry as a whole?
You sure you want my opinion on this?
I can't wait for it. You see how I clearly spent some time putting this stuff together because I was so excited to get your opinion on this, because as somebody who experienced it every day, the FMCSA that's your entire day. You're constantly dealing with things that the FMCSA is responsible for. And I know that drivers in general think that there's a little bit too much red tape out there from time to time. So, long answer to your short question. I can't wait for your take on this.
I don't know that a change in leadership is going to do anything. I think we need a whole new change in attitude. I understand the safety concerns. They're valid. But a lot of those safety concerns could be addressed in different ways. For instance, I think it boils down to it's easier for them to legislate things that affect the driver, like the lower speed limit, hours of service, things like this. When I assume, and I don't know this for a fact, but I assume that there's lobbyists and things for all these huge corporations and warehouses and that keep them from legislating that end of it. For instance, would be you show up at a certain client that has big warehouses all over the country, and I won't mention their name, but you know who I'm talking about. You can't be there more than an hour, sometimes more than 30 minutes ahead of time. You have to sit in line at the gate sometimes for 30 or 45 minutes to get through the gate, but don't get there more than an hour ahead of time. Then you have to get through the gate, clear the gate, go find somewhere to park, go in and stand in line at the check-in window. And don't be late, because if you're 1 minute late, then, well, you're a work-in now. So they get around to you when they get around to you. Now, doesn't matter that you showed up an hour and a half before your appointment if you're 1 minute late getting in that door. And then they don't think anything, especially if you're not one of the big player companies. They don't think anything of keeping you there 4, 5, 8, 10, 12 hours.
Wow. But
once they get done, okay, you got to go now. You can't stay here. No. A lot of places since COVID won't even let you use the restroom. They don't mind keeping you there for 6 hours, but you're supposed to hold it. So this is one of my pet peeves is that the shippers and receivers need to be held somewhat accountable. Either there should be a time limit that gets you in and out, or realistically, I think there should be an area to park. If they can't get you in and out in a reasonable amount of time, reasonable to me would be 2, 3 hours, 4 tops. If they can't get you in and out in 3 hours, then there should be a safe place for you and your truck to park. There should be facilities for you. I mean, I don't think they ought to have to feed you. People can plan ahead and bring a peanut butter sandwich, but they ought to at least provide somewhere safe to park so that you're not violating your hours of service and you're off of the road. But, they turn you loose at 10 o'clock at night after you have no time. You go to the nearest truck stop. There's nowhere to park. This was one of the huge stresses in my career was being let go in the evening and then having to find somewhere to park.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where truckers are shooting themselves in the foot. And frankly, why I'm glad I'm not out there anymore. They implemented the 30-minute rule where you have to take a 30-minute break. Instantly, the 30-minute break became the fuel island.
Oh, yeah. I hear a lot about that.
You need to drive up, pull up, fuel up, go to the bathroom, grab a drink, leave. You're on the road. You're trying to make miles. You get hung up at the fuel island for an hour simply because these idiots won't move. I've seen them take a shower bag in and go take a shower with their trucks sitting at the fuel pump while you got 4 of them backed up behind the guy. That's truckers doing it to themselves. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the solution to that is. I can't figure that one out. I think you ought to just be considerate. Maybe have a 30-minute or 1 hour parking area where you can come in, you can do what you need to, pull through. Mm-hmm. But
for sure.
Again, I think a lot of the legislation is coming right down on the driver's head. We're out here trying to make a living, trying to deal with all of the rules and regulations we've got. And it's easier for them to go for, the legislators to say, okay, well, we're taking care of the safety issue. We're going to lower the speed limit, or we're going to cut the hours of service, or we're going to do this. Yes. Okay. It sounds good on paper, but they're just hurting the truckers, the guys that are trying to get the job done. Why not address it from the other end and get some corporate changes to help the drivers? And then it'll be safer because they won't be tired. They're taking their 8-hour break when they're really working.
Right.
I mean, honestly, you and I both know that they're sitting there. You got to sit in the driver's seat and watch for the green light in your rearview mirror so that they're through unloading you. Well, you're taking your 8-hour break. If you get 6 or 8 hours, if you get 7 hours in, you're waiting on that 8-hour break. So you've been sitting there all that time awake. You might have caught a cat nap or something, but you're awake, and then your 8 hours is back. H&M is not bad about this, but other companies, man, you got your 8-hour break. You should be ready to roll. So they're exhausted drivers out there on the roads.
Yeah, which leads to giant safety issues. And, it makes me wonder. I had a friend who was in preventative maintenance, and he had been working welding and building things and working out problems. He's one of those guys that one day he called me over and he said, "Hey, I need your help for a second." And I walked into a barn and he had pulled a 350 out of his 1972 Chevy and completely taken it apart. And it was my job to come back there and help him. One of these really well mechanically inclined guys that could do anything. And every day he would tell me, I got these engineers that'll come into the project and they've never seen the project before. They've only seen it on paper. They don't have any idea what we're actually working with. And then they tell us to change all the things that we're doing. Well, this is going to cost us 2 or 3 days because we can't do what they want us to do. It works on paper, but it doesn't work in application. And it seems to me like that's a lot of what's going on with the FMCSA. We've got career politicians. We've got elected officials that have never actually sat behind the wheel of a truck or never run a trucking company or been a dispatcher or any of these places where they could have worked and built a lot of knowledge as to what change will actually positively affect the industry. But instead of putting those people in these positions, we put in elected officials that are, in my humble opinion, sometimes more concerned about patting their own pockets and shaking the right hands than they are about actually affecting positive change within the industry. And I'll be honest to you, it seems to me like this kind of sends a message to the industry that properly regulating it with dedicated leadership might not be the priority, Denny. It seems to me that Ms. Hutchinson was more interested in, as I said, patting her pockets than advancing the industry. And I don't have a large sample size of examples here. What I do have is, 5 years of movement at a glacial pace when it comes to these legislative arms doing their actual job. And one glaring example of a rule being discussed that would have massive effects on the drivers and is surely a hot button in the industry. Meanwhile, the FMCSA's fearless leaders at a cocktail party shaking hands and kissing babies. This just doesn't add up to me. And it seems like what you're saying, maybe to grab the entire FMCSA by the shoulders and kind of shake it up a little bit and get some more qualified people up at the top to maybe advance things that are more important to the drivers rather than just the corporations that surround the drivers.
Yeah. And a lot of things is just, they don't make sense, like scale houses. If they truly want trucks to go, down the road with the proper weight, and there's businesses that regularly, often, almost always run loads that are almost 80,000 pounds, then why not require them to have a scale on site and give you a certified ticket showing that you are legal rather than make you go to a truck stop? But I'm sure there's a lobby for Cat Scale and all the other ones that, they're making a ton of money by guys having to go and scale it and adjust it and rescale it or go back and get something taken off, which again, that's just hours of service that you're eating up.
Yep. And don't forget the fines. Any type of fines that get worked in there, those go into a different pocket to help somebody else make money. And it seems that the almighty dollar, like many things in our country, is kind of the ultimate governing body here.
Well, yeah, and there's an example would be Banning, way station in California. They have road service trucks that I guess never leave. They may go home and shower or something, but they pretty much live at that way station. You don't have to call somebody and say, come out here. There's so many trucks taken out of service at Banning that there's one or two or three there already. They're ready to fix you at a premium rate.
Yeah, right. At a premium rate. That's the most important thing that you said there. I'm sure it's 2 to 3 times what you would pay if you were elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the nature of the game. It's all about the almighty dollar. And we're going to keep you updated as this story unfolds. In the future, obviously, FMCSA will appoint somebody hopefully sooner rather than later. And let's hope that we get one in there that is also confirmed by Congress rather than just these interim bosses. I don't think that sends the right message either. Have somebody that's dedicated to this. This is our entire economy. And sometimes when you look at the FMCSA from 100 feet up, it seems like it's kind of dangling by a thread here. So as I said, we'll keep you updated on this and make sure that we get you in here, Denny, to discuss more things like this, because the insight that you can give, like that, when you were talking about all the different things and giving your real opinion there, it just really shines a light on, because I know about all the things that drivers deal with. I talk to drivers on this podcast every single week, and we talk about parking, and we talk about people stopped at the fuel island. We talk about stupid four-wheelers. We don't get a lot of time to talk about the governing bodies that really do control what goes on here. And maybe we should spend some more time talking about it, because it sounds to me like things aren't as organized in the closet as they should be.
Well, and, if you take it a step further, it's really a domino effect. Say a driver loads up and he's over 80,000 pounds. Well, first of all, he had to drive from that location somewhere to get a scale. He scaled out. Okay, he's overweight. He's got to go back. They got to take something off. They got to go back and rescale it. All this is time lost. This could easily domino to where he's got to call dispatcher and go, okay, I'm not going to make this delivery. So dispatcher's got to get to the load planner. Load planner's got to get email off to the broker or whoever. They got to reschedule it. So it's not just the driver. It creates a headache and a nightmare for everybody in the industry.
Yep. Agreed. His name is Denny Stone. He's got over 1 million safe miles under his belt with H&M Trucking, and you are going to hear from him plenty more on this podcast going forward if I have my way. Denny, thank you so much for being here, my friend. I really appreciate the time, and I'm looking forward to many more of these chats with you in the future, my friend.
Sounds like fun. Thanks for having me.
Time to get the word straight from the drivers here on the H&M Trucking Podcast. Today, I've got driver Dave Olerich with me. Dave, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Marcus. It's great to be here.
And I've also got Lorus Axt here with me. Lorus, we appreciate the time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, man, it feels so good to have you guys thank me for something that I enjoy doing so much. Like, that's always something to me that is a little bit foreign, because I feel like, if anything, you guys are the ones doing me a favor here. So, but as always, every driver that joins me from H&M, I'm always very grateful for their time. I love the conversations that we get to have. And I think that today's conversation is a little bit of a hot button, a lot like we talked about electric trucks and various other fuel methods last week. Well, this week I kind of want to center the conversation with my two guys here on autonomous trucks, because we have seen some things in the news about the autonomous truck technology innovation as of late. And I guess I'm just going to start here with a quote for you guys, and then we'll jump in and kind of get your thoughts on this. This quote comes from Glenn Mitchell. He's the head of product management at Mix Telematics. He says, quote, everyone's talking about AI, but it's not really using the machine learning side of AI. We're not talking large language models and all that type of thing, which is what we call generative AI. We're talking about machine learning with pattern recognition, which enables us to predict what's going to happen and allows us to optimize the decisions that humans make around the activities in the fleet. Mitchell also noted that AI for current technologies such as dash cams and routing improves, but new cases will also develop where machine vision is not used only on vehicles, but in the yard as well. For instance, to identify whether a dock is available or tell how much cargo is in the trailer to help optimize trailer loading. And by the way, just for reference, I'm getting this article and these quotes from fleetowner.com if you want to go over there and check that out. Dave, I'm going to start with you here. What are your thoughts on autonomous trucking? And I guess tell me how you feel about the fact that there could be driving out there in the lanes next to you, a truck either with or without a driver in it, operating itself. What do you think about that?
To me, if you're going to have a driver in the truck, the driver in the truck might as well be driving the truck. Okay. And I don't know the way I see cars weave and dodge around us on a daily basis when we are driving the truck, I can't imagine what it's going to be when there's nobody driving it, how that truck is going to respond to the stupidity of four-wheel drivers. The first time somebody gets killed in one, there's going to be, a big uproar about it. So
for sure, especially if the machine is at fault, if it's something that the computer
Correct.
Didn't react to correctly. And
Correct.
You bring up such an interesting side of this conversation, and that is, they say that the computer, once it's trained and learned everything that it needs to know, they think that it can actually respond faster than a human can, and it can anticipate better than a human can. But I've always really questioned that, because unpredictability is exactly what it says it is. You just can't know what's going to happen until it happens.
That's like the computer seeing a bridge pylon and thinking that it's somebody in front of me slowing down and slams my brakes on.
Okay, so a little bit of experience with the driver assistance technologies that doesn't always work perfect is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay. Lorus, I want to go to you on this. What are your thoughts?
Technology is what I've seen in the trucks itself with some of the gadgets that we have on there has actually improved in the driving. Now, when we talk about a driverless truck, I think I've seen actually a couple of them going down into Nevada. Mm-hmm. Now, Dave is over on the van side. I'm over at the hopper side. And I know I talked to my wife's uncle about this a few times, and he's an incredibly learned man. He's one of the guys that put big in Dallas, that is, and he has. So we talk about this because he was concerned at how long that may be here until I get phased out. In the hopper side, I don't visualize this for some time. It's because of all the putting in the grain and what have you, and also the cost would be almost astronomical. Because of the farmers and whatever, would have to have machinery that would go along with that. That I'm thinking it still would have to be manual or a man work to it with the machinery. Now, I think machinery and the human touch has to always be in there. We talked about the legal issues, and I thought about this the other day. Let's say a car slams into a vehicle and it kills some people, and you're the nearest of relatives, or you're one that got injured pretty hard, and you're trying to sue the company. Now, it's interesting because I was thinking, if you sue the company, they're saying, well, wait a minute, you really can't sue us because it was this one part that malfunctioned, and we bought this over here, and then you try to go after that, and you find out it's from a foreign company, and I can really see a nightmare logistics in just to try to even it out. So I don't know if I thought about this a little too deeply, but I just thought that, this could be a nightmare.
I think that is a very interesting part of the conversation as well, Lorus, because a lot of the talk behind autonomous trucks or driverless trucks is you start to think about labor costs. Of course, that's the one thing that all the fleets are going to look at, but the insurance behind these things is going to be different than any other insurance that we've ever seen, I think, because with your traditional insurance, you're always looking at who's at fault, who did something wrong. Well, if it's not the other driver's fault and there is no second driver, then I guess we have to default to saying it was the computer's fault. And what you're bringing up here is, well, the fleet's going to say, hey, I'm independent of the computer. That was something that this tech company designed. And all of a sudden you start to leapfrog from company to company trying to find someone to take the responsibility. The diffusion of that responsibility is, I think, an issue in and of itself that has got to be figured out. And this is something we talked about a little bit last week with the electric trucks. It's almost like you've got the cart before the horse here. It's great that the technology is at the level that it is and allows us to test these things, but putting them into operation logistically is a whole different ball of wax. And I don't think we've even started to build that ball of wax at this point. As I'm reading through some of this stuff here, I've actually got something here from Transport Topics. There's a company that had a showcase at the American Trucking Association's 2022 management conference. So this is going back a little ways. And Plus Drive's product is actually a driver-assisted autonomous truck where I actually watched a video. This guy gets in the truck, they pull up onto I-5, and he double-clicks a button, and he takes his feet off the pedal. It's a lot like cruise control, except it's also maintaining the lane, but it will literally slow down and stop if he takes his hands off the wheel for 15 seconds. You guys already have a lot of these types of driver assistance technology pieces in your truck, don't you, Dave?
Well, that one right there, what you just said there makes absolutely zero sense. If I'm going to take my hands off the steering wheel, well, what good does it do to have the autonomy in the truck to begin with? If I have to sit there and maintain control of the steering wheel the whole time, I might as well be driving. Once again, I might as well just be driving the truck.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to be sitting here looking at my TikTok or my Facebook account while the truck's driving itself, that's something else, or until I get to somewhere where I have to back the truck into a dock, or the snowing in Colorado and the chain law comes out, I have to get out and put chains on the tires or hook up to the trailer. How is that autonomous truck going to hook up to a trailer and hook the air hoses up?
Right.
How's the autonomous truck by itself going to put the chains on the tires? How is it going to, do all the things? How is it going to get itself fueled up? It's just, there's a long way to go before they can go without the driver doing it.
For sure. And it sounds like to me, just based on what you're saying, that if you are going to be responsible for hooking the hoses up and putting the chains on and doing the pre-trip and all the rest of it, might as well just give you the keys and let you drive it yourself. You'd rather do that, right. It sounds like.
Exactly right. If I've got to be sitting in there behind the steering wheel, and I've got to be me watching what's going on in front of me, and if I have to keep my steering wheel, just because I don't have my feet on the gas pedal, I don't have the feet on the gas pedal now with cruise control.
Mm-hmm.
But is that an autonomous truck?
No. I do not think
exactly. I still have to maintain, if I'm driving down the road, like you said, and I take my hands off the steering wheel for 15 seconds, and what happens then? So.
Yeah, it slows down and stops for you because it thinks that you're taking a nap in the sleeper.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, it is interesting, though, because I think that there's probably two schools of thought out there, because I have read some quotes from some other drivers that have been in this kind of testing sphere of these types of trucks. And for instance, this one with Plus Drive, there's a driver named Crystal out there that says, I wish I had it earlier in my career. It makes my job so much easier. And that seems to me like someone who maybe isn't, maybe doesn't enjoy the job as much as, say, you do, Dave. I mean, it doesn't seem like driving bothers you that much, so why not just do it?
Not at all. Exactly right. And I mean, we have our computer system in here. It can't remember what load number I'm on from yesterday. I have to manually go back and put it in. It can't remember from one part of here where I have to add in what trailer number I have. It can't auto-populate the rest of the computer system for that. and they're going to expect the computer to drive the truck by itself? I don't think so.
Yeah, let's perfect the calculator first before we put the computer behind the wheel.
Exactly right.
Loris, how do you feel about these kind of driver-assisted models of autonomous trucks? Do you think that that's worth it, or do you think that they should, if they're going to go after this type of technology, do you think it's something that they should completely take the driver out of and have it be fully independent, maybe operated remotely? What are your thoughts there?
Well, from my perspective, and I'm Dave's, I'm sure also, and for the guys that have went to school and learned how to drive trucks and stuff like that, there's a lot of investments that we put in order to drive the trucks and then make a living. And once in a while, it kind of gets in your blood, and it's kind of hard to kind of get off, especially if a machine's going to take over. I know this has happened with the horse and buggy and what have you, but this is really going to be interesting, because when you take the human touch out of things, to me, and I was in sales before too, and even over the phone when you talk to people, sometimes you're not going to quite get it. You have to have that eye-to-eye contact. Mm-hmm. But if you're behind the wheel, I feel that if you're sensing something, I think Dave alluded to this earlier, but you're more on top of this. Now the machinery might get it, but let's just say you run into a bunch of snow or something. Some of these computers can be plugged up where not all systems are a go. So what do you do? And then if someone back in the office says, "Oh, we got to shut this truck down," where are you going to shut it down if it's not going to run right? And are you going to take a space up for somebody at the parking lot? It's interesting. Matter of fact, it's very interesting.
The sensor on the front underneath in the dash that controls your cruise control, if that gets covered with snow or ice, it stops working. Now the cruise control doesn't work.
So obviously inclement weather.
All these sensors.
Yeah.
The inclement weather is going to be a nightmare for it.
Right.
See that coming.
Which is probably why they're mostly testing this kind of in the Southwest. Like you said you saw them down in maybe Nevada, in that area. They got to have it down there where it's going to be out of the mountains, out of the mud, rain, sleet, hail type stuff, and someplace where it's always really nice. And obviously you hope that if they are going to pour a bunch of investment into this, they'll figure that out. But that's a very rudimentary problem, right? That is affecting this really advanced technology. It's kind of, you see the science fiction movie where, let's take Star Wars, for example. They built the Death Star and they couldn't patch up a 3x3 foot hole. Like it's kind of that same thing. Like, you're building a truck that can drive itself from Dallas to Las Vegas, but if it gets a little bit of dirt on the sensor, shut the whole operation down. That seems a little bit backwards to me.
Correct.
Well, what do you guys think about the idea of self-driving trucks from afar? This idea would be kind of like, there's a truck out on the road, there's no driver in it, but there is a driver playing video games somewhere across the country.
Correct. Like they do with the military drone planes.
Exactly.
The guys in Des Moines, Iowa, sitting at the Air Force Base, National Guard are flying the drones and bombing in Iraq.
Exactly. So what do you think about that application? Is that something that you would... let's say this all within the next 10 years, it all happens and trucks are going autonomous day after day. You guys have the opportunity to jump out of the driver's seat and sit down in a computer and control this truck from afar. Is that something you're doing, Dave?
I don't see it happening for me doing no. I see, now you can't even get if it's the owner operators aren't going to jump onto it. Obviously, They don't even, but they buy older trucks now. They don't even have to have ELDs in them. So they're not going to be doing it. The only way that this is going to actually happen, if it's mandated by the federal government that all vehicles have to be that way, period. So then there will be no choice in it. And then let them handle all the responsibility of figuring out how they're going to, fuel the truck up, how they're going to get from point A to point B, how they're going to, DOT scales are going to have to go away because that autonomous truck can't scale a trailer and slide the tandems without help.
There you go. Interesting stuff.
There's a million different things that you have to have a driver available to be able to do to make the system continue going down the road.
Yep. Lorus, how about you? Is that an option that you'd look into, driving a truck from a computer in a nice air-conditioned office?
You know, if you would have asked me last week, I would have said yes, definitely. Especially going through South Dakota and Wyoming, and you know, today. Actually, I'm actually at the house today, but today, this morning was the first day, I think, within 2 weeks that it wasn't freezing in the morning. So, like I said, if you would have asked me last week, that would have been a welcoming idea. I don't know, you know, Marcus. For a human perspective, that could get pretty boring, pretty dull. If you're in a room, you know, constantly watching that a monitor for the you know, let's say outside or for your truck, rather than having that touch there, you know, where you're driving it yourself. When you're driving it yourself, you know, you're a lot more alert. You know what's going on. But if you're sitting in a room driving that truck, I think you could probably drift off to something else, end up playing a video game or reading a magazine or something else. And that's when things can get kind of haywire.
Yeah, absolutely.
2 weeks ago, I'm coming back from Kansas City, heading up on Friday, heading up into Iowa in the middle of that snowstorm coming in. Mm-hmm. I was empty with 45-mile-an-hour side winds. I parked the truck and waited for the winds to die down until Sunday morning. And I want to see an autonomous driver in a room somewhere 1,000 miles away from that truck handle that truck at 45-mile-an-hour crosswinds empty on an icy road.
Yeah, it's not happening. You need your hands on the wheel for that. No question about it.
Iowa right now you go from Davenport to Omaha, which I just drove today, and I counted 15 trucks still in the ditch because the insurance companies are fighting. The driver doesn't know whether they're supposed to tow the truck out, or the insurance company's going to tow it out, or the company itself is going to tow it out. So here they all sit, still in the ditch. And that was from 2 weeks ago.
Wow. Yeah, it seems like we're a long way away from this. I mean, look, American Trucking Simulator, the video game, has made some amazing strides, but I don't think it's ever intended itself to be anything other than maybe a learning tool and something that people can enjoy. It's not meant to actually get freight from point A to point B in any place but a virtual world. Dave, you touched on something interesting. You said that unless the federal government mandates this, you don't see it taking over the industry in full. And I agree with you there, but I do want to ask you, do you think this is something that the federal government in the not so far distant future might try to mandate?
Well, I tell you what, we can't get the federal government to leave us alone long enough to actually do our jobs. You know, they mandate now that we had to go to the ELDs. Now, I've never driven a truck without an ELD in it. I've never done that. I don't have a clue how to do paper logs except what I learned in school when I first got my license. Mm-hmm. But if they would stop mandating the driver and start mandating the shippers and receivers to get us loaded and unloaded in a timely manner, we could slow the trucks down. Instead of mandating us to slow the trucks down to govern us at 65 miles an hour or whatever they feel necessary at, which once again, the owner operators aren't going to do. Mm-hmm. It's just going to be the company drivers that are going to be mandated to go that slow.
Sure.
You know? I think they're trying to mandate the wrong end of the spectrum here.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you know, the head of the FMCSA just last week has decided that they are stepping down. And some of the criticism that she's received has been she was at a fundraiser while that very issue, the issue of limiting speed further on trucks, was being tabled at a discussion with lawmakers. And she was across town drinking cocktails with lobbyists and lawyers that were actually in favor of the mandate. So, you know,
exactly.
It's amazing to me. You're not the first driver, and you certainly won't be the last to tell me that maybe we stop mandating the drivers so much and start working on shippers and receivers, for instance.
It's upsetting to me when I go into a warehouse and they've got 50 doors, okay, and they've got 2 doors open and a line of 20 trucks sitting there waiting to get unloaded, and they've only got 2 of those 50 doors open.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? I'll be honest with you, Dave. I've never driven a truck, but I can relate in that happens to me in the grocery store when they've got 19
exactly
checkout,
right.
19 checkouts and 2 open. I want to tear my hair out.
I told a presidential candidate here in Iowa last 3 weeks ago, I said, if they charged these shippers had to pay the driver $200 an hour to sit and wait, I guarantee you there would be a forklift and a driver at every available door.
Yep, there would.
For $200, and you had to pay the driver, not the company, the driver that $200 an hour. From the minute he checked in till the minute he left. I guarantee you would be unloaded in less than an hour.
And you'd also have a lot
Every
more
day.
happy drivers sitting in that lane.
Yes,
because
you would, and they wouldn't be sitting there. They wouldn't be driving 80 miles an hour down the road trying to get there because they were held up for 6 hours at a receiver trying to get loaded or unloaded.
Yeah. I'm wondering, Lorus, on the hopper side, do you get the delays at the various facilities that you end up at as bad as the van drivers do? Because it is something that I hear a lot of van drivers talk about. I've been sitting at a receiver for 8 hours before trying, and I've got no hours left on my clock. There's no place I can PC to park safely. There's all these problems that arise. Is that something that happens on the hopper side as well?
It does. I don't know if it happens as often as it does on the van side, but it does happen. I think we're real fortunate with the hoppers because a lot of our customers that I deal with are ones that we deal with previously and, are good customers to us. So it seems like there's a pretty good flow. But now and then, with the machinery breaking down or people maybe not showing up or, one thing or led to another or somebody in the office ordered way too much or not enough, something like that. But it does happen. And, that gets kind of trying, especially when you're need to get out. You can't really park there, and you got to find a safe haven to go to, rather than somewhere that you may run into trouble if you park according to what your clock reads. So
also a lot of the problems that we start having with holdups is when it is a brokered load. We don't seem to have problems with the customer loads that we have. Like I drive a lot for Winfield United. And I don't have any trouble getting loaded or unloaded any time I do a Winfield load. But when I go to somebody else, like I spent 15 hours at General Mills waiting to get loaded, and they didn't have product. Well, I'm sorry, there's 6 other trucks sitting there waiting that have been there just as long as me and other, but that was a broker load.
Wow.
It wasn't a general H&M customer that, we were short on something. So, and the problem with that was a Friday night, Saturday morning, and I live 3 miles from there.
Oh, man.
And I was supposed to be on home time Saturday. So, what do you do?
Well, you're going to have to spend your home time fixing all the holes that you punched in your wall out of anger when you finally got home.
Exactly. You can't go to sleep because you don't know when they're going to come and get the green light because nobody's coming out to tell you they're done. So you sit there and you're sitting there watching that green light and trying to watch television. You're trying to do all these things. Yeah. Anyway, what's going to happen with the autonomy? That's the autonomous. The driverless truck's not going to care. It's meaningless to them. But then the receiver's going to hate it because now that truck is 15 hours late.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of how much the person that's responsible for the truck likes it or dislikes it. It's more of to me, it's like a straight up professionalism and common courtesy thing. And I understand that there's, any given receiver might have 1,000 trucks coming in a period of time. And I understand that that's probably really hard to handle. That's also 100% the receiver's problem that they put themselves in there. It's not the driver's fault that this ended up the way that it did. Maybe don't order so many chickens,
Exactly right. Exactly right. You don't schedule 25 trucks to show up when you've only got 2 docks.
Yep. Well, this is one of the reasons that we have these conversations, not only to talk about the future and what might happen and how you guys feel about it, but also to air some frustrations that happen to you guys daily. And there again lies the problem. Without a person, without that personal touch that Lorus talked about and being able to be right there, I don't feel like you can handle these problems, which are relatively minor problems, right? You guys still get your jobs done, sometimes not on the clock that you want to, but the freight still gets from point A to point B. You guys still get home safe. And yeah, we lost some hours here, but okay, well, problem solved. But how does a driverless truck deal with this type of stuff? And how many other problems come from the one problem and kind of the ripple effect that happens thereafter?
Well, the driverless truck is not going to be tired. So he's not going to be mandated to follow an 11-hour driving scale or a 14-hour day total. He can drive 24/7.
Very true.
That driverless truck doesn't have to take a vacation. That driverless truck doesn't need home time. That driverless truck doesn't need all of these things. That's what the way they're looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to pay insurance on a driverless truck. You don't, for medical insurance. Yeah, exactly.
Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you sharing some time with me and your thoughts here today. This has been really enlightening, and I had a pretty good idea of what truck drivers in general think about autonomous trucks, and at least their thoughts on, how far off in the future this really is. I think there's a few wishful thinkers out there that think within a few years we can be replacing massive chunks of some of the big fleets with autonomous trucks. I don't see it, guys. I really don't. And I appreciate you coming on here to talk to me about it. I want to give you both a shot real quick before I let you go. I like to open up the floor for you, let you say anything to anyone that might be listening. Lorus, we'll start with you.
Well, I think if you're on the hopper side, I don't think you have to worry, at least for another year or so, until the farmers and the ranchers and everybody else will buy all this new equipment. But anyway, I don't foresee for the next couple of years. I think we're okay, but just have a second option available at always.
For sure. Dave, the floor is yours, my friend.
All right, thanks. I want to say again, thank you to Tim, my manager, and Lindsay. She does a great job for us all. Jim and Mitch, appreciate them getting me loads when I need them and keeping on top of it. I want to thank my wife, and I want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Lorus, Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. We'll get you both back on here again sometime soon, all right? Take it easy and be safe out there.
All right, thank you.
Marcus. Thank you.
Time to pull this hog out of the pit. She's all done. Episode 45 is in the books. I don't know why. It's winter. It's gray where I live. It's just been raining nonstop ever since the ice melted, and I was just really wanting to be at a Hawaiian luau. And what's better than the pit pig that they cooked? I don't even know what the name of that way of cooking things is. I know they dig a big hole in the beach, put a lot of hot rocks down and cover it with banana leaves, and 8 hours later, you've got some of the best pulled pork you'll ever have. So if you're wondering why I say pull this hog out of the pit, she's done, that's where it came from. I apologize if I confused or offended anybody with that, but I just really want to go on a tropical vacation. You're going to have to live with me from time to time. I'm a little quirky. That's why podcast host is my job and not, something important like truck driver. So I want to thank everybody for being here today. I don't have a ton of time. We used up so much time with our interviews earlier that we are already over time. So I'm going to get up out of here. I just want to thank you all for clicking that subscribe button. Check us out over on YouTube. If you haven't checked out H&M Trucking's YouTube yet, or you haven't been over there in a while, the YouTube team has been up early and working, son. So get over there and check it out because there's a lot of good content there. And you can even check out a video version of this podcast if my dulcet tones aren't enough for you and you just want to look me in the beard. That's fine too. Head on over to YouTube, search H&M Trucking. That's it for you. Next week, we're going to have a fun conversation. We're going to get into brokerages a little bit, maybe even get our buddy Tim back on the show. It's been a while since we talked to him, and I even had to wear one of his tracksuits the last time I was in Omaha. It was white and covered with gold Asian tigers. Really not my look. But thank you again, everybody, for being here. Stay tuned for next week's episode. Again, we hit those every Wednesday morning, 5 a.m. Central Time. We'll see you next week. And as always, stay fresh, cheese bags.
Thank you for listening to the H&M Trucking Podcast. Please leave a review, subscribe, and connect with Marcus over at the H&M Trucking social media channels. And if you're considering a job at H&M, find us at hmtrucking.com. Until next time, stay safe and ahead of the curve drivers.